It's 2 a.m. and I can't sleep because of my mom's voice. William, where are you? Please, just say something so that I can follow your voice and find you. Mom mumbles in her sleep every night these same words, even though I'm right by her side. Doctors say that my mom has PTSD symptoms because of what happened to my brother. It's been a year since that incident occurred, and I haven't recovered from that physically nor mentally. Right before Chuck E. Cheese was about to go bankrupt, COVID-19 had already spread across the world, and the lockdown was announced. It was our last chance to hang out with our friends at our favorite place, Chuck E. Cheese. So I went upstairs and called my brother Jake and asked him to lend me money from his monthly allowance, but he didn't respond. So I thought he must be studying, and it's best not to disturb him. Jake used to be a book nerd, and he used to wear glasses from an early age. He was timid and obedient, and didn't have any friends beside me. While I, on the other hand, was a rebel. I went downstairs and sneaked out without letting my mom know, like I always did. When I reached Chuck E. Cheese, my friends were waiting for me near the arcade at our usual spot, and Jake was already there. Jake never hung out with us, but after hearing about the lockdown, he might have changed his mind. So I laughed and teased Jake for being brave for once in his life. My friends also started to make fun of him. One of my friends, Henry, suggested that he is willing to take Jake in our group if Jake can do something daring, to which Jake instantly agreed. I was shocked to hear it, but I knew he wouldn't actually do anything because he was weak and he gets scared easily. All of us went inside together and headed toward our favorite games. Jake chose to play a popular shooting simulator game. In the arcade, some of the games were more popular and we had to wait in queues for our turn. Jake spent an hour waiting for his turn, while we finished playing a racing game and went on to play other games. But I couldn't enjoy my games because I was focused on Jake the whole time. It was quite unbelievable to see how patient and calm he was, or maybe it was just his presence that bothered me. Later, we decided to take a break and then eat some pizza, so I went ahead and asked Jake to lend me money. Jake denied, and he kept on playing the game. After we finished eating, Henry said, "About that daring activity, will you be able to do it?" And Jake replied, "Yeah, of course." Henry was about to say something, but I interrupted him and said, "The pizza had less cheese today. If you can bring some from the kitchen, then we will accept you into our group." "Okay, I'll go home and bring it for you, William," Jake replied. I laughed and said, "You act smart, but you're actually dumb. I meant bring cheese from the Chuck E. Cheese kitchen." All my friends laughed at my remark that I made about Jake. I felt guilty on the inside, but couldn't show it in front of my friends. I was only able to become friends with them because I acted cool. Otherwise, none of them would have accepted me either. My family was not very well off. We had been struggling financially since Dad left. Mom has always been busy with her job as a nurse. She works in the hospital in the front of the house. That's probably the reason why Jake used to keep his head immersed in the books, and I used to crave attention from others. It was getting dark, and we decided to go back home, but Jake insisted that he will complete the task, so we stayed for a while when Jake left to bring cheese from the Chuck E. Cheese kitchen. Almost an hour passed, but Jake didn't return, so Henry and Ivan concluded that he ran away because he is not brave at all. I was feeling uneasy but couldn't say anything in front of them, so I left with them without looking for Jake. After I reached home, I was tired, so I fell asleep on the couch waiting for Jake and Mom. Later that night, I heard my mom screaming my brother's name. She was looking for him, but he couldn't be found. She searched for him everywhere, and I was so scared, so I didn't tell her about the Chuck E. Cheese hangout. She told me to stay home and went out to look for my brother. Next morning, a policeman came to our house and told him that they had found a body some locals had recognized him, and it was my brother. Apparently, there was a fire incident in the Chuck E. Cheese kitchen, and the boy was stuck in there. His lower body was damaged from the fire, and his lungs were damaged from too much smoke inhalation. My mother fainted after seeing the body, and she was taken to a hospital. The police started questioning me regarding the incident. I told them that I went there with my twin brother and friends and how we played games, and teased him a little, asking him to bring cheese from the kitchen, and how when my brother didn't come back, we assumed that he got scared, ran home, and all of my friends left, saying he must have left early. But I went back for him, and I didn't find him there, even after spending an hour looking for him, so I returned home as well. The police took my statement and started an investigation. After a few days, they informed us that someone left the oven open and a short circuit occurred that caused a fire. After the funeral of my brother, my mom and I were getting therapy, but for some reason, it wasn't working for either of us. My behaviors changed completely after that incident. According to the doctor and my mom, I had become timid and frail physically and mentally. But they don't know that I had been like this, timid and frail. It was my brother who was a rebel and stronger than me. I looked at William's picture that was hanging on the wall and said, "Sorry, brother. I couldn't live in your shadow for too long, and I couldn't tell Mom that it's not me who had died, but you." Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so.
Pedro's death. Hey Ian, do you want to have a sleepover at my house tonight? It was my best friend Pedro who was over at my house watching TV. Only if we play the new Mario Kart game that you have, and you have to take permission from my parents, I said while making my way to the couch next to him. Consider it done, my friend, he said, giving me a wink, and then looked over to my mom who was in the kitchen. Mrs. Brown, my parents are out of town, so can I have a sleepover with Ian in my place tonight? I promise we'll not stay up too late, he asked my mom in a loud voice. Why don't you sleep over at our house then? Mom came closer and then asked him with a soft tone. It's because of the dogs. We cannot leave them all alone by themselves, he said. Okay, fine. But promise that you both will sleep on time, Mom said in a strict tone, and we both nodded our heads yes. After that, Mom packed the snacks and dinner to eat, and we headed out for Pedro's house. This house was 2 blocks away from mine, so we walked there. He unlocked the door, went inside, and I went straight to the fridge to put the food in the refrigerator. So Ian, I haven't played the game yet, not even a single time, Pedro said while showing me his new game. That's great. It'll be like both of us playing this game for the first time. By the way, which version is this? I haven't seen this in any of the stores, I asked while looking carefully at the game. I don't know either. When I went to buy the game, I only saw one copy of it, so I bought it, but I never got the chance to try it out, he said while casually shrugging his shoulders. I looked carefully at the game and then realized that I'd never seen it or heard of the version before. None of my friends have it. More like they've never even talked about this. So it might be either a new sample version or some old version that I never heard of. We decided to play it after having dinner. Pedro said that we were supposed to feed the dogs first, so we went there to feed them. His family had 2 golden retrievers who were extremely friendly. One could say, too friendly. We went to the room and filled their bowls. They were sleeping, but the moment they heard the sound of food, they woke up and came running down to eat. It's not like I don't like dogs. I love them, but from afar. I'm more of a cat person, and I've been befriended several stray cats in our neighborhood. After feeding the dogs, oh by the way, their names are Molly and Sammy, but I never call them by their names. Anyway, we went to the kitchen, took out the box that Mom had packed food for us in, and emptied it out into some bowls. When the table was set and we were ready to eat, Pedro came with a wine bottle and 2 glasses in his hands. You know, we're not supposed to drink that, right? We were too young, I said while pointing my finger at the wine. But no one's here, and if you don't tell anyone, no one will know either, Pedro said with a smile on his face. Fine, but if we get in trouble, it's on you, I said while serving the food on my plate. Okay, now don't be a chicken and let's just enjoy, Pedro said, and he put a bottle on the table. We enjoyed dinner with a wine while taking our sweet time. And after we finished the dinner, Pedro was the one to wash up the dishes. As planned, we were going to play the Mario Kart game right after dinner. So I went ahead and took my place on the couch and waited for him to finish doing the dishes. As Pedro was finished, he made his way down to the couch and the two of us started playing the game. The game looked like it could be played in multiplayer version and it looked quite fun. We started the race and I was the one to win the first game, which made Pedro charge of his challenging mode. "Oh, it's on. I'm going to beat you this time, real bad," Pedro said while correcting his sitting position, and we started round 2. "Okay then, whoever wins 3 rounds wins the game, and the loser would buy the winner whatever they asked for." I was also so fired up, so I made a challenge, which he accepted in an instant. After playing for about an hour or so, we were tied on 2. There was one more round left and whoever wins this round would win the entire game. But as we started playing the game, it started to glitch and then it just turned off. We tried to turn it on many times, but it just did not work. So we thought that it was dead. I cannot believe it. It's like they gave you some old copy of the game, I said while trying to turn it on. "Let's just leave it. I'll return it to the store tomorrow." As Pedro said this, I was about to put it back, and then all of a sudden it turned on by itself. One weird thing was that it was showing 3 players, while there was only 2 of us playing. So Pedro put the game on 2-player mode, but then again, it showed 3 players playing. It completely freaked me out. We looked at each other and got up without touching the game, and then ran upstairs to Pedro's room and locked it from the inside. "What do you think that was?" Pedro asked me with a freaked out voice. "How would I know? It's your game." As I said that, some weird scary noises started to come from downstairs. It also sounded like someone was playing the game, which freaked me out even more. All of a sudden the game's voice stopped coming. Instead, the sound of someone's footsteps approaching in the direction of the room we were in began getting louder and louder. Within 5 minutes, the footsteps stopped right in front of the bedroom door, and after a long pause, someone started banging on the door. I'd started to feel panicky and breathless, and I guess Pedro was experiencing the same thing as me. As the banging stopped, it started scratching the door and started making a really weird sound. Horror struck, Pedro and I looked at each other with frightened eyes, and then Pedro started to scream with fear. Right after screaming, he held his chest and passed out. The noises continued, and it wasn't long before I passed out as well. When I woke up, I found myself in the hospital, getting an IV drip. My parents were sitting beside me all worried, and I found out that when Pedro's parents returned the next day, they found dogs barking uncontrollably and led them to the room where we were unconscious. The door was locked from the inside, so they had to break it to enter. And when I asked about Pedro, my parents hung their heads in silence and told me that we were both admitted to the hospital, but unlike me, Pedro woke up and started panicking, but soon after he got a heart attack and died. I've been unconscious for the past 5 days and missed Pedro's memorial ceremony as well. When I asked Pedro's parents about the game, they told me that they never found any game in the house. I was quiet after that, only speaking occasionally when needed. And it's been like that for the past 6 years. Even after all these years, I still have nightmares every single night in which Pedro comes to see me and cries while looking straight into my eyes.
Minecraft? What's that? Isla asked, all confused when I was talking with my friends about the game. Isla is my girlfriend, and we have recently started going out. She was over at my apartment to spend some quality time when my friends gave me a conference call. It's a very popular video game, interesting too, and once you start playing it, you just cannot stop, I told her. Okay, so how do we play it? She asked again. You build crafting tables, tools, shelter, understand the hunger meter and gather food, etc. It progresses depending on how you play it, I said, uninterested in going into complete detail with her. I want to play it too. As she said this, I jolted my head toward her and looked her up and down. Isla was the kind of girl who is more like a model than a gamer. Now, I'm not the kind of guy who judges others easily, but she has a chick vibe, The size of her average fake nails was a maximum of 5 centimeters long, and that's not an exaggeration. So now you can guess for yourself if she could play or not. Are you sure you can? I looked at the nail while asking this, which she understood and nodded yes. I logged into the game and started explaining it. At first, I guided her through it, but then she told me she'll play it on her own. So I shrugged my shoulders and went out to buy some chicken and beer. As I was buying them, I was thinking if she was able to play comfortably or not, because it looked difficult for her to hold the controller with those nails. When I came back, I saw Isla lying on the sofa and watching something on her phone. "You're not playing anymore?" I asked while putting the beers in the refrigerator. "Nah, it's boring. I don't want to play it anymore." As she said that, I snickered, and she glared at me in response. I controlled my laughter and went to my chair to start playing the game because she seemed busy on her phone as well. My best friend Adam called and asked if I wanted to play together with him and the guys, which I agreed to immediately. I started playing with them and got so focused that I lost track of time. When I finished playing the game, I noticed that Isla had already left without informing me. I called her, and she said that since I was busy playing the game, she did not want to disturb me, and that's why she left without saying anything. After talking with me for a few minutes, I disconnected the call. I went to the kitchen and took out the chicken and beer. I heated the fried chicken, and after that, I opened the television and switched to the channel where the football game was already being streamed, and started to enjoy my meal while watching the game. The next day, Isla came over to the apartment again to spend more time with me, and surprisingly, that day Adam did not call even once to ask about playing Minecraft with him, and neither did he answer my calls. I spent most of my time with Isla, and as she started to focus on her phone again, I thought about playing just one game, so I called Frederick. First, I asked him about Adam, and he told me that he did not even speak to him since last night. We thought maybe he had a family emergency or something, so we let it go and started playing together. I checked the time, and it had been over 2 hours since we started playing the game. I looked over to the side where Isla was sitting, but she wasn't there. She had left again without even informing me. I sighed in disbelief because I knew she was doing it on purpose to prove something to me. She was the one who gets busy with her phone first, and then she expects me to just sit there and watch her play with her phone. I didn't call her this time, and why must I every time? If she had an attitude, so did I. After thinking about these things, I once again tried calling Adam, but his phone was turned off this time. At this point, I started to feel worried about him because he was not the kind of person who would ever put his phone off for this long. He answered every damn call, even when his father died, with whom he was so attached. The next day I called Frederick and was shocked to see that he wasn't answering his phone either. Even after calling multiple times, he didn't answer his phone. A random yet weird thought crossed my mind, that every time I played a game with someone, that person stopped answering my calls. Was it because they didn't want to play with me anymore? No. That had never happened before Isla came into the picture. She was here both of the times when I was playing the game with them, and each time she left abruptly. I remembered she was supposed to come over today as well, so I waited impatiently for her to arrive because I wanted to confront her about the situation. I wanted to ask her what she told them that they've started to ignore me. The doorbell rang. I opened the door, and it was Isla. She hugged me as soon as she saw me. She looked quite happy and said that she wanted to spend more time with me today, so I thought maybe I was imagining things. I went to the kitchen to bring some water for her, and when I was walking back from the kitchen toward her, I noticed that the phone she was holding seemed different, yet familiar. I thought harder, and I remembered that it was the same model Frederick was using. For some reason, I was freaked out by the fact that Isla's new phone was the same as my friend's. That day, I did not play the game at all and completely focused on Isla. I was imagining weird, horrible things. So after she left, I called Frederick's brother to ask about him. and what he told me shook me to my core. He said that yesterday after playing Minecraft with me, he received a phone call and then went out. He hasn't come back yet. I called Adam's mom just to check if my suspicion was correct, and she said, "I don't know where he's gone off to after receiving that phone call. I'm just coming back from filing a missing persons report for him."
It's every kid's dream to go to Disney World, right? It's a dream that a lot of American kids never get to have come true, let alone British kids. So I always felt extremely fortunate and privileged that my parents were not only financially capable of taking our family over to Florida for a couple weeks, but also that they actually put the time aside to do something like that. In all likelihood, they probably didn't want to. I mean, no offense to anyone that does, but what kind of actual grown-up wants to spend all that time queuing up for rides in the baking hot sun after paying for overpriced churros and chocolate sauce? That's not even touching on the pure scam that is Disney dollars. But still, my parents relented to mine and my sister's pleas to take us all the way across the Atlantic to arguably the craziest state in the Union, Florida. This happened a long time ago, back in 1998, so excuse me if I misremember any details about the park itself. But I remember the year pretty clearly because of the game StarCraft had just come out, and I was fortunate enough to pick up a copy in the US before it was even commercially available in the UK. To 10-year-old me, Florida was like the land of the lost or something. I mean, it had actual dinosaurs, i.e. alligator farms, where you could feed the big old beasts with hunks of meat, something I was way too scared to do myself, but was only too happy to watch my dad do before he scampered away down the wooden walkway like he was regressing into a childlike state out of pure primal fear. It was the land of Tropicana, where the food portions dwarfed those in the UK, and the grass and trees were so different and fantastical that I might as well have landed on a paradise alien world. It was the Sunshine State in name and in nature, and of course, it was the home of the most magical place in the entire universe, Disney World. But it was during our third and final day trip to Disney World that something happened that I didn't properly understand until I was a great deal older. The truth of which my parents tried their best to shield me and my little sister from for as long as they could. And this is how it happened. So, I remember we were in the Animal Kingdom part of the park. I was always really interested in natural history when I was growing up, so I was particularly excited to see this part of Disney World, and was incredibly happy and excited to be there. I had to wait 3 whole days at Disney before we finally got to see that particular part of it, and every other kid there seemed to be just as happy as I was, all except one. On the shuttle bus out at the park, I remember seeing this one little girl with her dad, who looked uncharacteristically miserable for a kid who actually had the good fortune to be visiting Disney World. But I mean, there's always one moody kid out of the bunch, isn't there? One who never seems to have any fun no matter what's happening. So honestly, as confused as I was about it, I forgot about it pretty quickly as my own excitement at seeing all the animals quickly overwhelmed me. My favorite Disney film was The Lion King, so go figure, I was buzzed. But throughout the day, whether we were on the rides or on the little safari tour thing, or eating at one of the cafes there, I'd see this little girl and her dad, and she looked consistently exhausted and unhappy. I found myself starting to point where my mom and dad were like, "Stop staring at other kids, it's rude." So, I did, because I knew they were right. Of course it was rude to stare, and besides that, the little girl seemed awfully upset, and surely me just staring at her would only make it worse. So a little while later, I remember walking along drinking one of those ginormous American zillion-ounce sodas or whatever, happy as Larry, when I see the little girl and her dad in front of us. I'm not going to pretend to be all like, I knew something was wrong. I sensed it, 'cause I didn't. Not at all. But one thing struck me as kinda odd about the whole thing. By the time I was 10, I hated holding my mom or dad's hand. It was what babies did, I'd say, and, like me, this Little girl didn't seem all that keen on holding her dad's hand, and at one point even tried to shake it loose. But he kept holding on to her, and at one point started properly gripping her wrist and telling her to behave. I obviously found this kind of distressing, and I looked up at my dad as if to be like, "Are you seeing this?" half expecting to be told to stop staring again. Both my parents looked kind of concerned about what was going on, but I didn't dare say anything. I was old enough to know that some kids misbehave sometimes, and people around had that kind of cringy, pretend it's not happening kind of feeling about them. Only then, instead of just calming down, the little girl just bursts into tears and starts wailing, "I want my mommy, I want my mommy," while the guy is trying his best to calm her down, all like, "We'll get you to mommy soon, sweetie," and all this other stuff that he was saying. What happened next is kind of a blur in my memory. There was just a lot of commotion, but this is how my dad tells the story from his perspective. Apparently, while the little girl is waiting, my dad hears her blatantly say, "I want daddy, where's daddy?" And the way he tells it, the mood in the crowd around us like visibly shifts as it suddenly becomes obvious that this guy that had been taking her around the park was not her father. There's slight hesitation though. No one actually acts on the revelation for the first few minutes or so, and for good reason. The guy might have been her uncle, a family friend, a legal guardian, or carer. There was nothing evidently insidious about it. That is until the guy snaps at her in a way that is distinctly unparental. Apparently some other American dad was all like, "Is there a problem, buddy?" or something, and the guy is quick to calm the situation down by telling them that, "No, there's no problem. The little girl's just having a temper tantrum." Then someone asks if the guy is actually the girl's dad, to which he apparently replies, "Yes," before trying again to reassure the gathering crowd that everything was okay and that she was just having a tantrum. Now the next part I remember pretty clearly, because the girl shouted something before the man with her clamps her hand over her mouth so hard it sounded like a slap. My mom starts pulling me and my sister away from the scene since it was starting to turn ugly, like really ugly, really fast. According to my dad's version of it, what the girl had screamed before the guy tried to shut her up is that he wasn't her dad at all. Not only that, but he had took her. And that's when it starts getting confusing for me again, because all kinds of people started moving forward and blocking my view, and all this shouting and moving kicks off. But I do remember seeing this tubby woman shoving her way through the crowd of people, with that same little girl in her arms, who by that point was just sobbing uncontrollably. After that, I remember seeing the crowd that had formed around the guy begin to sway and shift. There were shouts and screams. I mean, like the kind of screams that were so intense and frightening that they made me shake and shiver with fear, and had my little sister bursting into tears. By the time park security showed up, who 10-year-old me just assumed were the police, the crowd began to disperse, and I distinctly remember seeing the man who had apparently taken the little girl from God knows where, pinned to the ground with someone on top of him. That's about the only part that I can remember crystal clear to this day. A lot of my memory has been filled in with my mom and dad's retelling of the event, but the image of that guy's rage, how it twisted up in his features, is still burned into my mind. And it's been made all the more sinister by the fact that I now know what he was so angry about. He'd taken that girl and kept her pliant because he'd promised her a trip around Disneyland. She was probably so keen to go that she just hadn't fought back, and God knows what he was intending to do with her afterward. But that chance had been taken away from him by a bunch of do-gooders. At least, that's the way I imagine he thought of it. Playing this sick long game of lulling his prey into a false sense of security before he finally got his way with her. Not that I realized any of that at the time. To 10-year-old me, it was all just this big mess of confusion and fear. But knowing that whatever was going on was just very, very wrong. We have no idea what happened to the man or the little girl after that. No one spoke of it again for the rest of the holiday, and I'm pretty sure it was almost 5 or 6 years before one of them brought it up with me and explained exactly what the situation was. As far as I knew, all I'd seen was a dad mistreating his daughter who had then been arrested for it. And even to this day it screws in my head that one of the worst things I'd ever witnessed happened in what was billed as the happiest place on earth, and how if things had gone just a little differently, that girl could have been a corpse, or worse, a few days later, and none of us would be any the wiser. Thank God she spoke up when she did. Thank God that there were people there that reacted the way they did, because I really don't want to think about the alternative.